I'm Jenny Miller with Pezzi Publishing, and I'm here today with Dr. Sunita Osborn. She's a clinical psychologist and trauma-informed and attachment therapist specializing in couples therapy and reproductive mental health. And she is the author of 3 books, The Miscarriage Map, The Miscarriage Map Workbook, and her newest book, Selfish, which is what we're here to talk about today. Thanks for being here, Sunita.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
So the subtitle of the book is one of my favorite parts. When bubble baths, wine, and positive affirmations aren't cutting it. Tell me a little bit, before we get into the other questions, tell me a little bit about how that subtitle came to be and kind of where your mind was when you were naming the book.
Yeah, it's such a good question. So, I think the title is very much, and when I wrote it, is not a coincidence that it was around after my daughter's first birthday, at a time where you're just so focused on the needs of other people, and particularly my daughter at the time. And I was finding such a tension and actually making time and space for myself. And a lot of the suggestions that I would get would be things like, well, just, take a bubble bath, like this too shall pass, enjoy this beautiful time that you're having, all this kind of different stuff. And while helpful, it wasn't getting at what I actually needed to happen at this time, that I needed to really focus on myself. There was a depth that felt like it was just missing. And that was actually when this word selfish started to even come up a little bit more. So around that time, my husband and I decided that we were going to have just one child, my daughter. And it was not the first time, but one of the first times I got called selfish recently, where someone made the comment of like, oh my God, you're only going to have one child? That's so selfish of you. What are you depriving her of? And it made me think about all the times that word has come up for me. There was a time that led me to write the Miscarriage Map Workbook, where after we had our pregnancy losses, we were debating, do we even want to have kids? And getting called selfish for that choice too.
Yep.
And the second time it happened, I was like, oh my gosh, we cannot win as women, it feels like, of decide not to have kids. That's selfish. Decide to have one kid. That is selfish. Mm-hmm. But when things really shifted for me, is someone made the comment of, your daughter's going to be so selfish if she doesn't have any siblings. And it's like my relationship with that word shifted in that moment, because my immediate response was, good. I hope she is being called selfish, because that means in a world where women are very much reinforced for being self-sacrificing, abandoning our needs, taking care of others, she's actually recognizing she has a self to pay attention to. And that was when I was like, okay, yes, it's more than that. It's more than the bubble baths. It's more than the wine. It's more than the positive affirmations. Those things are all helpful, but it's not enough. We need more than that.
Well, and in your book, you kind of research, what society in general considers self-care, self-love, and so much of it is kind of rooted in, buying things and, capitalistic kind of things. And that's a big part of your book is kind of demystifying what those things really mean. So I think that's incredibly valuable in this time. So let's take some questions from the audience. We'll see if some of these, here we go. What inspired you to write Selfish? So that's kind of, you just answered that, touched on that. Are there any other inspirations, like when you were treating clients, did you start to realize, I'm hearing so many women talk about, how they're not prioritizing themselves and they feel kind of shy to do that. Did that play a role kind of in how this developed?
Oh yeah, I have had very much like the honor of sitting with so many successful, professional, inspiring women in my time as a therapist and just as a person in general. And what I would find is that there would be times where women would make maybe selfish moves, but it would only come at a point of like, it's survival at this point. Okay, I'm going to miss work today because I am just deathly ill, or I am going to take a break from parenting or just being the caretaker in my family system because I truly cannot endure anymore. And there was always this question of, does it only get to happen when it's this bad, when it's truly like, if I don't do this, I will drown at this point? What about when you're actually doing okay? And this would just make life a little bit more enjoyable, purposeful, happy, meaningful for you. And I think that's what really inspired me too, is I don't want us to only make these kind of moves when we truly need to and we're desperate, because that's going to allow us to do all the other things we do for everyone else. But even just day to day, when it just makes your day a little bit better.
Right. Well, and I feel like when women or when people in general get pushed to that point, then when they do make a quote unquote selfish choice, it's almost seen as, this drastic in their behavior. And then that's usually met with like kind of negative feelings. And so I feel like, your kind of theory on build that into your wellness care long term.
Yes.
And then it just is part of you. It's like part of how you care for yourself from the get-go.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's see. Next question. Why do you think many people view being selfish as a negative trait? Oh, this is like a loaded question. How can we shift this mindset, particularly for women?
I love this question though. And I think one of the big reasons is because selfish lives on the other end of the spectrum of the traits that are currently very much praised in our society. Like we are really praised for being self-sacrificing, for focusing on the needs of others above our own, for all people, but for women particularly. If you think about, I don't know, the person on your team who goes on vacation and stays online the whole time just to help finish that last project, and they are praised and lauded of like, wow, what a team player. You really went above and beyond. You don't hear, at least verbally very often, that same kind of recognition for like, wow, that person who said, hey, I'm going to be offline because I need to focus on myself and my family, but I will be there on Monday, 8 a.m. We don't get that same kind of recognition. So I think part of why it's viewed as such a negative trait is that we don't see it being recognized in a positive way. Really, we see the opposite behaviors are being the ones that are being to be praised. And very much for women, I think that's true too. The stuff that's reinforced for us is being nurturing and caring and loving. And there's something that selfish feels like an antithesis of that. And how we shift that, I think, is really trying to challenge some of those assumptions and trying to confront some of the misinformation about what it means to be selfish. And, I try to put it really simply that when I use the word selfish, I mean simply recognizing you have a self to focus on, recognizing that you have a self that if you don't pay attention to it, it is going to get left behind. It's going to get neglected. It's going to get abandoned. So that's one piece of it, is being able to confront that, challenge some of that misinformation, and then we need to model it for other people too. There's something about, if I am that person who goes on vacation and says like, hey guys, I'm not going to be reachable during this vacation, but I will be there on Monday. Thanks for understanding. Appreciate you guys. I've just made it that much easier for someone else to do it. Versus if I'm that person who stays online, believe me, I've done both versions of this as well too, then I have just made it a little bit harder for someone else to make a self-focused, selfish move next time.
Right. And you touched on something that I think is so important. It's like, I think selfishness is often, synonymous with self-centered. But I mean, the facts are your life does revolve around you taking care of yourself, and you can't be your best self if you're not taking care of yourself. I think that concept is just so foreign to people that feel like, okay, let me just take care of my parents, my siblings, my children, my spouse, and then I can work on me. But at the end of the day, there's no time left to work on yourself. And so you're just putting yourself on the back burner over and over again. And, there's only so much that a person can take after all of that.
Yes, definitely.
So, let's see if we have any other questions. What's the difference between self-care as it's portrayed online and self-care that actually promotes wellness and growth? Is there any overlap? Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. I think there is some overlap in the sense of the outcome may look very much the same. So the actual task activity that I'm doing may look really similar. So whether it is something like getting a massage, going to brunch with friends, things like that. I think the difference in the way that we talk about it in therapy versus what we see online is it needs to be tethered to something. If I'm going to brunch with my friends, what makes it meaningful is that it is something that my person actually truly needs in order to be cared for right now. So one thing we talk about with self-care is that there's many domains to it. There's the emotional, there is professional, there's relational, there's your physical health. And so for my relational domain, maybe what I'm really needing is connection with others. That is not something that I have enough right now. So brunch with my friends truly is that. But if I don't have that connection to it, second part of that question, promoting wellness and growth, it's not going to necessarily help me grow. If it's just go to brunch with your friends, hashtag self-care, what is that tethering to me? How is that actually helpful to me at this point? I imagine many of those things can still be enjoyable, soothing, and everything else. But we're talking about how do I actually, for the long term, promote wellness and growth? That's the piece I think that gets missing on those posts is what is it connected to? Why do I need this right now?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting too, because when I was reading this book, I was thinking about, certain things that I've called self-care that were just kind of like those, instantaneous results types of things that, don't actually last beyond like, I don't know, the 20 minutes that I'm doing it. So like even doing, and then, there's other things like skincare or, getting a facial, but then some of those things are complicated as well, because while they are, good for you, you're taking care of your skin. A lot of that I feel like is rooted in like, societal expectations of, like how women should care for themselves. And so I think it gets kind of muddy. Like, are you doing it because it makes you feel good? Or is it just something that you feel like you're supposed to do in order to look like you're caring for yourself?
Exactly. It makes so much sense. I think there's just something about being able to be really rooted in your why of why am I doing this right now? And why am I choosing to keep doing this over and over again? And maybe it is because it truly is in line with my values. Or maybe there's something we need to question there. Is this coming from someone else's expectations of me that I don't necessarily want to buy into anymore?
Right. Let's see. Next question. In your experience, what are some common barriers that prevent women from prioritizing their own needs and practicing self-care? I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but.
Gosh, I have so many reasons to come up with more. I think some of the big ones that come to mind is, I think, again, all of us, but women in particular, we have so many competing identities, I think, that make it challenging for us to prioritize our need and practice self-care and taking care of ourselves. So, for example, if I have the identities of being a partner, a mother, a friend, a daughter, all those things, and if I have this idea that each of those come with all these responsibilities and duties, where do I have time for myself in that? There's something about that. Those things can't exist at the same time. And I do think that's another barrier we have, is a tendency maybe even towards black and white thinking, where I either have to fully take care of everyone else or I can only fully take care of myself. And that's where part of the goal here is, let's introduce some flexibility. Something that's really important to me in this book is I am not the therapist or the author to say, you got to spend about 2 hours a day writing and then reflecting and then doing something else, because that may not be actually realistic for your lifestyle. But there are specific things that you can do if we use some flexibility and creativity to take care of yourself in your life. So I think that's some of the barriers. And one last thing that comes to mind is that we're praised for. We're praised for not being selfish, or being self-sacrificing, for showing up even when every part of us is saying no. So it's hard to resist that.
One thing I also kind of thought about when reading your book was, you also mentioned self-care, true self-care being, making that doctor's appointment that you've been putting off. And
yes,
like some of those things that are actually good for us and do end up, contributing to our growth and wellness are things that we don't necessarily enjoy, but like are a real form of self-care. And so I think that could be another barrier for me personally, is like having to actually make all those appointments and actually having to get up and go to the gym, when I don't feel like I want to do it. And, I think that's a lot of the self-care, hashtag self-care, is rooted in like instant pleasure.
yes,
And not always like that. So
definitely true. I'm a little biased, but I enjoy therapy. I know clients don't always come to therapy enjoying it, but it falls under that. It is self-care. It's taking care of yourself. And it's not necessarily always a very pleasurable experience.
Totally. Let's see. I think we have time for one more. How can someone balance taking care of themselves while also being considerate and supportive of others in life? This is a good one, because I've thought about this. Where's the line between me prioritizing myself and taking care of myself and kind of creating barriers for other people or making things inconvenient for others?
Yes, yes. I think the biggest and most impactful way we can do this is including them in the conversation. I think we get into a challenge when we decide I'm going to make this big life change in my life or try something different. And I decide I'm just going to keep that all inside myself and not tell anyone what I'm doing and to start making these changes. And they have no idea what's going on. They start to be confused about these differences in your behavior. So being able to let them know, like, hey, I'm trying something new right now. I am really trying to work on focusing more on myself. So you may see me acting differently. And if that happens, feel free to ask me about it. And I think that's the other piece too, is as women, we have a tendency to bring both the problem and the solution to the table. Mm-hmm. Sometimes being able to just come in of like, hey, so I've got a problem. I've got to be here at this time. You need this from me. Can you help me out? Let's try to figure this out together. So I think those are a couple of ways that this can still be taking care of the entire system and very much focusing on yourself.
And you also, I think, mentioned, it's not like there's no formula. There's not like one exact way to take care of yourself. And it's really like a journey of self-discovery and figuring out what you need to thrive.
Right.
And I love the idea of including other people. Like I've done that with my husband a few times. Like, hey, just want to let you know, this is my intention. I'm going to try to do more of this. Mm-hmm. Like, if you see me not kind of living up to that, don't be afraid to give me a nudge, or like I'm not as present, like let me know, but just know that this is my priority right now. And I've had great success with that. Even with friends, I've had people say, if I turn things down, like if I turn down plans, like please don't take it the wrong way. I'm just working on myself, or I'm prioritizing something else. And it's usually well received. I think more people, like you said, just need to talk about it.
Completely. It goes back to that piece of modeling. Now I'm making it that much easier for you to do that to me in the future. I hope you do.
Awesome. Well, Sunita, we're almost at time. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the book, or another kind of key point that you want people to take away? By the way, if you guys want to purchase the book, you can follow the link on the banner below, and or you could also scan the QR code at the top of the screen. So either way.
Yeah, I guess my only thing is that I hope that this is something that people find helpful, and just know that you're not meant to do this in isolation. Do this in connection with others, and know you're not alone, that this is not easy work, but we're here with you.
Awesome. Well, everyone, Selfish, When Bubble Baths, Wine, and Positive Affirmations Aren't Cutting It is out now. You can get it on Amazon or PezzyPublishing.com or a bunch of other online retailers. It's worth a read if you are a woman, if you know a woman, if you love a woman, or if you're a man and you need to focus on some self-care as well. Check it out. And thanks so much for being here, Sunita. It was great talking with you.
Thank you.